So I think, you guys know I'm Pastor Joe's daughter. And Joanne inherited me 19 years ago. 19 years Tuesday. You guys just had an anniversary, so that's really exciting. But how many of you guys, are there any other pastor's daughters in this room? Pastor's daughter. Okay, so awesome. Okay, so you girls know. There's a tiny expectation of pastor's daughters to be perfect. And we don't really have like our own lives. I'm Pastor Joe's daughter. That's actually why I'm here. So the end. No, I'm just kidding. But it's really weird because you grow up and you think, I have to be perfect. I have to look perfect. I have to act perfect. I have to sit on the front row. I have to show up in my Sunday best. I have to have a smile on. Everybody has to like me, which isn't always the easiest thing. But, they don't always like you, and try as you might. We were living in Susanville, my dad I don't know if any of you guys know where Susanville, California is. Anybody? Yeah, tiny little good-for-nothing town in Northern California. And we moved there when I was 12. So I moved to Susanville, brand new, starting 8th grade, which is a terrible time to start a new school. And I had one friend, and it was a boy. So that was dangerous. And I was not interested in him in any way, shape, or form. I was just like, here's a friend. He's nice to me. And he and I were walking down the street one day together, 12, and one of our parishioners, one of the congregation members, saw me walking down the street with this boy, and they called my mom and they said, Janet, do you know that your daughter was walking down the street with the boy? And my mom said, I know where my daughter is, and heaven forbid if she's walking down the street with a boy, stop helicopter parenting my children. Which was really sweet. Her and my dad always really tried to protect me from that kind of ridicule, or, she was like, I know where my kid is. I actually told her she could walk down the street with a boy. So it's just a good example of the magnifying glass I felt like I lived under. And I really just wanted everybody to like me and think I was a good girl and think I was good enough, to be Pastor Joe's daughter, because he is hands down the smartest man I know. So being his kid was just like intense. I was like, okay, I've got to be awesome because he's awesome. So, and if you know him, you know I'm right. So I'm not trying to build him up. If you don't know him, get to know him because he is awesome. Anyway, so I was just always afraid. I was scared to death of what people were going to say about me, or if they were going to call my mom and say something else. And so I was always performing for perceived perfection. And I started to know how to answer all the questions properly and do all the right things and serve and show up and behave right. And along the way, I picked up on a belief that if I do everything right and I check all the boxes, God will protect me. If I'm faithful enough, if I serve enough, if I'm surrendered enough, then maybe I won't be judged so harshly. And maybe I would not need as much approval, and hopefully I could hold on to everything that I love. It just, I don't know if you guys have had that feeling of okay, if I'm perfect, then I will get my way, which I don't. I really like to get my way. So my faith became transactional. I'm going to do this, and you're going to do this. And I would sing all the songs. I was on stage singing songs since I was 3. They threw me up there at 3 years old and thought it was cute. It was terrifying. But anyway, so, it seemed to work for me for a really long time to have a transactional relationship with Jesus. I actually felt like it was working. I'm like, okay, this is good. So you can see that fear really took root in me super early. I was really just petrified that everybody was going to realize I wasn't awesome and that I was a normal girl. Along the way, My mom, she protected me from all of that. She was my biggest fan, my biggest advocate. She was my very most favorite person on earth. I honestly feel like I didn't really have room in my heart for anyone but my mom. It was just so funny. I was just like, she's the best. She's amazing. When I was 20 years old, I went to college and I cried the entire way because I was leaving my mom. And when I got there, she cried the whole way home too, so it wasn't just me. But I actually started, I wasn't going to tell you guys this. I am going to tell you this. I could not handle being away from her. I started drinking booze because I didn't want to feel how I felt. I was so sad. Yeah, it was almost a little weird, I think. And I felt like I kind of just always knew growing up, and my brothers and I have talked about this since, we kind of just felt like she wasn't going to be around, Clearly she's not, because now I have Joanne, which I love. But we knew, we just kind of could feel it. So when I was around 20 years old, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. It was like the same year. I'm going to college, I'm crying half to death. And then she gets diagnosed with breast cancer. And she didn't handle it. So she's a pastor's wife. You would think, hey, Mom, they expect you to be perfect. Get on it. She wasn't, and she didn't handle it well. She did not handle being sick. I don't know what you guys think, how you should handle being sick. But as her daughter, I thought she was amazing. So I was like, why aren't you handling this better? Just stop being sick. It doesn't work like that. So I was a little judgy, I was kind of like, okay, Mom, I learned a long time ago that you have to be perfect, so get on it. She didn't handle it well, and I really think that she also knew that it was going to kill her, and it did. So when she was 54, she passed away, and I was 24. And it's interesting when you're 24 how old you think 54 is. And now that I'm 46, I'm like, 54 is so soon. That's just kind of terrifying. But I didn't know, again, it's like when she left me at college, I didn't know how to handle that. So I started drinking. When she died, I didn't know how to handle that. Pastor's daughter, I have Jesus in my heart, but I don't know how to experience grief and have faith in him at the same time. I just hadn't figured that out. So I numbed myself some more, and this time instead of drinking, I took antidepressants and I binge ate. And I got real plus sized. I was eating a lot. It filled a void, It was just like, okay, well, this feels good. And it's also socially acceptable, by the way, to eat, It's like drinking, you get in a lot of trouble for that, but eating, that's okay. You can do that. So I did that, but I did that to excess. And I made an agreement with fear. So then from that point, I was like, I am just going to stay scared. I'm going to stay alert, and I will stay in control. And then maybe I can continue to prevent bad things from happening to me. And I think a lot of us do that. We don't call it fear. We call it responsibility. We call it wisdom. We call it maturity, but we're actually just scared to death, And it's just me. None of you guys feel that way? So anyway, I carried a lot of fear into adulthood, just trying to figure out how to, be without my mom now. She was my best friend on earth. And kind of interesting tidbit, when she died, not that I expected this to happen at all, but some families, when something traumatic like that happens, they all just divide and they split and they run away from each other. Our family got really close. We pulled in. I actually moved back in with my dad. I was way too old to be doing that. And moved back. He kicked me out because he got married. It's true. It's true. Anyway. But I thought it was really cool because I didn't realize that my mom took up so much space in my heart that I didn't really have a lot of room for anything else, let alone Jesus, but also just my relationship with my dad. We became much closer, and we all grieved together, and it was a terrible but also wonderful experience to just have each other. But through that season, I carried fear into my adulthood. I carried into marriage, motherhood, work. I became the self-appointed reliable one. I was capable. I was the one who could figure everything out. My family would come to me, my brothers and my dad. I'm the only girl left, before Joanne came along. And they would ask me to figure everything out. I was I guess I was the decision maker. I was the middle child. I don't know how that ended up happening, but I was the decision maker. And what are we doing for Christmas? And what are we, I was like, how did this become my responsibility? But I was really, really good at working, and I was a very hard worker. I have found out since that I actually, last year at our church, we have this thing that's called Discover Services. We do this prayer and fasting, and my husband and I had the blessing of being spoken over. And in that time, somebody said to me that I have a gift of being a hard worker, and I always thought it was a little bit of a curse. And so when somebody spoke it over me as a gift, I looked back at my life and I went, that actually makes sense. I've always just been able to find work, been able to find a job, but instead of receiving it as a gift most of my life, and thinking of it as something special, I lived my life like it was my responsibility to just hold everyone together, especially after my mom died. But the work validated me. I wanted to feel indispensable, and it made me feel safe, and it made me feel in control. And I like being in control. So I married, and now I have, let's see. I started this before I was married. I started a business, and I was an esthetician for 10 years, and then I had to medically retire from being an esthetician. You guys know what an esthetician is? Okay. Sometimes I say that, and I'm like, I didn't know what it was until I became one. So anyway, I built this business, and I had to retire because my hands gave out on me. You kind of have to use those to be an esthetician. So I had to stop. And the Lord immediately gave me a job. I mean, I just kind of was like, well, I can't do that anymore. What am I going to do next? And he was like, here, do this. And I didn't even skip a beat. And that, again, when I look back, I'm like, oh, he was always providing for me, always showing me what to do next. But I just oftentimes was so scared that I was just like, okay, I'll just run after the next thing that comes along, because now I have 2 kids, and I have a husband, and I have a home that I have to take care of, and being an adult is hard. It's really scary sometimes. So you would think that I would have seen that he was providing for me, but no. Instead of resting in the truth that he was providing for me, I just worked harder. I got busier. I wanted to be essential. I wanted everybody to need me. I was talking to Dad and Joe about this yesterday. There's that verse that says that what the devil meant for evil, God will use for good. This felt like the opposite of that, where it was like God actually blessed me with this ability to be a hard worker, and I turned it into workaholism. So I was like, oh, great, I can do this. Now I'm what do they call it, a hashtag boss babe, I hate that term. How many of you guys, have you heard that? I hate that term. It drives me nuts. I'm like, oh my gosh. Glorifying being busy, just glorifying, oh, I'm so exhausted because I work so hard. And I'm like, stop wearing your exhaustion like a badge of honor. It's not good. We're supposed to rest, But I did, and I was like, okay, I'm like superhero mom. I'm going to do all the things. So it's funny because I say all this and you're going, oh, okay, well, what happens next? I ended up building a company from the ground up to a tremendously successful company. in 2019, the company was so successful that we ended up taking like this huge investment. It's in the food industry. The food industry is very strange. Lots of people like to spend a lot of money on food. You kind of need food, but that's not what I meant. Okay, never mind. So because we took this investment in this company, my boss promised me that she would give me, she would help me out, and I was able to go pay all of our debts off. We were debt-free. We bought a house in Reno, Nevada, which is my favorite city in the whole entire world. It still is. I love that place. If you have not been to Reno, don't go gambling. That's not what you go there for. You go there to look at the mountains and how beautiful they are, and maybe go skiing. It's gorgeous. I love Reno. So we moved to Reno, debt-free. I'm sitting in my backyard. I've arrived, right? Like everything that I planned worked out. I got what I wanted. I was in control. Everybody liked me. Paid off my debts. I was like, yes. Okay, we've made it. This is what life is supposed to look like. What was weird is I'm sitting there in my beautiful backyard. It's like, I wish I had a picture. I don't. It was gorgeous. And I owned it. It was mine. And I'm sitting there and I felt really unsettled. I think you would think that you'd be like at peace, like, oh, yes. But I felt really unsettled, and I'm sitting there and I can hear the Lord. He's like nudging me, and I'm like going, what do you want now? And I realized I didn't need him. All my life, it was transactional. Up to this point, I check a box. He does what he's supposed to do, and I didn't need him. And I went, do I want him? Because I think I should probably want him. I mean, that's the Sunday school thing, right? Like, I should want a relationship with Jesus. But I didn't know if I did or not. And that was actually kind of scary, to have him in my life my whole life, but really only know him for what he can do for me, but not because of just who he is. And I'm going to get all teary. It's so important, to know his character. And I just didn't. Excuse me. I sat in my backyard and I prayed probably the most terrifying prayer I've ever prayed in my life. And I said, Lord, I know you in all the ways that, that we've talked about so far, but I don't really know you. And I want to know you. I want intimacy with you, not just answers from you. And I want your heart, not just your help. And then because I'm, like I said, a real girl, I tell my kids that all the time. I'm a real girl. I'm a human. I have actual feelings, because I think kids don't think that you do, And so I gave him some conditions. I said, I want to know you, but also hold on, because sometimes I feel like I know you do things to people that they don't want, right? So I made a list. I said, okay, I want to get to know you better, but I don't want to lose my job, because I love my job. I've done a really good job with my job. And I don't want to get sick. We don't need to go there, Lord. Can we just not do that? And I also don't want to leave Reno, because Reno is the best place on earth. And I don't know if you guys have heard where she said I'm from, but it's not Reno. So there's that. We'll come to that later. So then I feel like, okay, I'm going to pray this prayer, and then I need to do something, right? I'm action steps woman. So I pressed in. I spent quiet time with him. I read books. And I just really prayed that he was no longer my drugstore Jesus. I wanted to know him. And then, not long after I prayed that prayer, I think that was July of 2019, I went on a work trip to Las Vegas, September of 2019, and we had a big company meeting, big, stupid hullabaloo, really unnecessary. They called me up in front of the whole entire company and called me the most valuable employee of 2019. and handed me an actual award, which I thought was ridiculous. I built this company, and now these people who came into our business and invested are taking control and giving me an award. And I walked up to receive the award, and I heard the Lord say, "This is the beginning of the end for you here." They were, and I just wrote that part down, but actually I heard him continue to say, "They're going to make an example of you. Like, you're going down." And it was almost as clear as I am talking to you right now. And I don't know, my kids always ask me, "How do you know when it's the voice of God?" I'm like, trust me, you know. If you have asked him to speak to you, and you have asked him to be a part of this thing with you, you start to recognize his voice, and he's like, "You're going down." And I'm like, "Thanks." So I was standing there being celebrated in front of everybody, and the whole entire time I'm just thinking, oh, this is not going to be good. They're going to fire me. And it was January of 2020. My boss, who is still a very good friend of mine, sat with tears in her eyes and let me go. She fired me. I had 3 months to offload. I had to teach 5 people how to do my job, and they were all getting paid more than me. And I was getting fired. But I don't know if you guys know anything about getting a severance pay, but this was my first experience of that. They had to pay me for 6 more months after they fired me, and I thought that was so funny. I was like, you guys are so dumb. You actually have, I'm sorry, is that not the right, like, Jesus doesn't talk like that? But who fires a person and then has to pay them for 6 more months? I mean, just keep me. Like, that's just weird. Okay, so I'll just sit here and make money and do nothing. That sounds great. I've never been in that position. I've been working since I was 16 years old. I've never had that happen. It was awesome. I was like, this is terrible and awesome at the same time. You guys can just pay me. But I mean, emotionally, it was really traumatic because I had built this thing, it was my baby. It wasn't what I had planned. We just bought a house. How am I going to make these house payments after the 6-month severance is over, But I had asked the Lord to kind of walk with me on this, and he's like, we got this. We can do this. It's not what I had planned, and here I am. I've lost my job again. This is twice now, and he's just opening doors and showing me what's up. And I'm like, okay, pretty sure I asked you not to do that. And I felt like my obedience to him was costing me something. I don't know. Have you guys ever felt that way where you're just like, dude, why? That's just not cool. Okay, so here I am. I'm now laid off. Somebody didn't obey the cell phone policy. There was a cell phone policy at the beginning. I'm just kidding. I always think that's so funny at church when somebody's cell phone goes off. I'm like, okay, so I digress. It's 2020, right? And now COVID has happened. And so I thought I was going to be severanced and like kicking back and just like drinking my iced tea in my beautiful backyard. And then COVID happens, and now I'm homeschooling my kids and wearing masks and trying to figure out who I can trust and what's happening in this world. And then I actually went to Longview to visit my best friend who lives there, who I followed there eventually. And when I came back, I plopped down in bed, and I don't know why, but for some reason, now we're just ladies, so I can tell you this, because I never say this in front of the boys. But sometimes when I lay down, I just my hands just go wherever they go, and my hand landed on my breast, and I felt the weirdest thing on my breast, and I was like, I yelled, Doug, my husband, and then he wasn't answering me because my bedroom was upstairs, and so I'm like texting him, come up here, you need to check this out, what's going on? And I had a lump in my breast, and so I actually immediately texted Joanne, because I go to bed really early, so I was plopping in bed, and I knew she was up. I texted her, and she was like, okay, most of the time it's not cancer, like most of the time, she said all the right things, and it was awesome. And she had a doctor that she went to, I don't know how many people know your story, but Okay, great. To throw you under the bus on your stuff, but yeah. So she was like, well, you know what? I don't know. You should just call him and see what he says. And he's a specialist, and you have to have a referral to get into specialists. And I called them, and because of my last name, they just put me right at the top of the list and got me in immediately, which was so sweet. And basically, let me see the order in which I'm supposed to tell you this story. I wrote it down. Okay, so I kind of thought, at some point my husband and I were always like, when I get breast cancer, because my mom had it, and I don't know if that's evil foreboding, but I just kind of figured it was going to happen to me. And so, you know, it was, but I remember that Romans 8:28 came to mind when I was officially diagnosed. I'm kind of telling you guys this little story out of line, but Romans 8:28 says, we know that God causes everything to work together for good for those who love him. And I know that's been a bit of a lifeline for my dad and Joanne through a lot of things that they've been through, but it was my lifeline at that moment as well. But stepping back just a tiny bit, through my getting to know the Lord better, I spent a lot of time in worship. And I think somewhere in like my bio or whatever it said I'm a worship leader. I probably should have mentioned that, but I'm a worship leader and love singing for Jesus. And in Reno, I was on the team, and they had actually asked me to start coming to this thing called International House of Prayer. They do like a 24-hour, 24/7, all the time praying. So we were in the middle of this intercession, and I heard the Lord speak to me right in the middle of this song. And he said, the tumor that you found is cancer, but don't worry, it isn't going to kill you. This is your mother's demon. I don't know. I'm a Nazarene, y'all. Well, I don't get too into like talking about, I don't like that stuff. It's your mother's demon, but you have to fight it for yourself and for your kids. And I was like, Lord. We were right in the middle of this song called Canvas and Clay. And there was like, you guys, I heard somebody say, so they know, yeah, it was a good song. We're singing this song, and there's this musical interlude. And in the musical interlude is when it's kind of almost dramatic. Like, this is when the Lord tells me it's cancer. But right after the musical interlude, the next sentence is, you're not finished with me yet. Well, I couldn't have timed that better. He just told me it wasn't going to kill me. And he told me it was cancer, but he's not finished with me. It kind of just felt like a seal of approval and like confirmation that what I was hearing was right. And a couple of days later, I did actually get the official diagnosis from the doctor. This time, I kept remembering how terribly my mom handled it. And I wonder sometimes if she ever got any kind of like word from the Lord like I did, where he said it wasn't going to kill me. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I just sit and kind of wonder that sometimes. But I knew that I couldn't just hope for victory, that I had to stand in victory. So I was like, let's go. Like, I'm going to kick this demon's butt. You know, like he just said, I can do this. We're going to do this. My way of like warfare is worship. And so I worshiped my face off. I worshiped through chemo. I worshiped through infusions. I don't know if any of you have ever had a PICC line. I highly don't recommend it. That was the worst experience of my life. And the entire time that I was sitting there having this PICC line put into my body, I cried hysterically and then just worshiped, sang at the top of my lungs with my mask on, you know, because it was COVID. So I'm like in the hospital, like, Jesus, okay. It was a really scary time, but I also had that promise that he had made. My worship leader, she would just schedule me whenever to lead worship, and I was on oral chemotherapy for 3 months. And it was kind of like this off and on thing that they did with me. And I would not tell her, like I would strategically not tell her how sick I was or how horrible I felt, just to see if she would schedule me for worship. And she inevitably always scheduled me when I was in my worst. And I felt like the Lord just wanted me as broken as humanly possible so that everything was his glory and not mine. And it was just this really special thing that we had between us where I was just so sick and I was just on my face for him. It felt like, now this is 2 times where something that was on my checklist, I don't want to lose my job, I don't want to get sick, but he prepared me. He told me ahead of time because I had asked him to know his character and to understand who he was, and he started telling me ahead of time that things were happening. That's twice that he did that. I love Jeremiah 29:11, where it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." And that was the one where I was like, okay, we got this. We're going to be fine. He told me ahead of time, I have a hope. I have a future. He has a plan for me. He's not finished with me yet. These are like all these little nuggets and promises. Like, this is the type of stuff that I share with my kids when they're like, how do you know it's Jesus? Well, look at all these different ways that he said that he's not finished with me yet. But I had to surrender my idea of what a hope and a future looked like. I just kept saying yes. I kept worshiping him, and I kept trusting him. Learning the rhythm of his voice was a huge part of that prayer that I asked, and getting to know his character. He just gently prepared me for each of those things. And I'm so grateful for it. And it's actually interesting. Just recently, I realized how blatantly he spoke to me. And I don't know, I lived it, but you ever just look back at your life and go, that was interesting. I asked you not to lose my job. I asked you not to get sick. You made me do both of those things, and you told me ahead of time. It's just weird. My computer decided to double zoom. I'm blind, but I'm not that blind. And that was too close. So I had 3 things on my checklist, and we all know that I already had to move away, but I'm going to tell you how that happened anyway. When the Lord asked us to leave Reno, he didn't tell me this time. He told my husband. And I think it goes back to the beginning where I was telling you guys how much of a control freak I am and how in charge I like to be. And now I'm like, hey, he tells me stuff. This is exciting. He did not tell me that we needed to go to Longview, Texas. He told my husband. And I was real mad about it because I was like, okay, that's it. 1, 2, 3, all of these, this sucks. And I was very comfortable in Reno. I loved it there so much. I had a community. They went through cancer with me, You really create a trauma bond with people when they walk through cancer with you, when they cry with you, when they hold your hand, when they, sit on your back porch with you and pray and worship and all the things. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. You're asking me to leave these people and this community and all of this stuff that I've built. But trusting God this time didn't look like I expected it to. It meant trusting my husband and his relationship with God, which I was like, no. I disagree. I got out a spreadsheet and I went through, this is what I do. I got out a spreadsheet and I had a pros and cons list, and I had our budget written down, and I was like, it's not even financially smart for us to do it. And he was like, I don't care. The Lord has asked us to go and we have to go. And I was like, oh. Okay, well, that's a horse of a different color. Anyway, it meant releasing control, and it meant that all the confirmation didn't necessarily have to be mine. Sometimes I had to trust, and I had to trust without complaint this time. I did go kicking and screaming. Now in the story here, I'm laid off, I'm recovering, I'm grieving the life I thought we would have. Now we're moving halfway across the country. And I will tell you, I had a few people that were real mad at me. They were like, no, I disagree. You are not supposed to leave. But we had to follow, what we felt like the Lord was asking us to do. It wasn't my favorite thing to do, but it didn't make sense, honestly. And sometimes trusting the Lord doesn't make sense. And it wasn't because I felt safe, but I felt that I was being obedient. It's being obedient stopped meaning getting my way, and it meant staying close to the Lord. And he just started showing me. I think it's just so funny how he made me do all those things. I keep thinking, hey, don't make a checklist next time. Looking back, I can really see what God was doing. He wasn't punishing me, but he was removing very specific idols from my life. I think that's the reason why you list them, Like if you have anything that you're putting before the Lord or that you're concerned about, like I think that's why it was my list. It was because I was like, these are my things. I'm not relinquishing my things. And he was like, trust me, I've got this. I asked the Lord if we could be closer, and then he said yes. And I said, can we avoid these things? And he said no. And then he walked with me through every single one of them, and we did it together. And as he walked with me, I learned to trust him. I learned that losing my job didn't mean that it was the end of the world. And he provided immediately, again, like he has continued to do. I didn't struggle for 1 second. And what's funny is we moved to Longview, Texas, and I didn't have an actual stable job at all. I mean, I was freelancing. My severance pay was long gone, and we just, with a wing and a prayer, we were like, well, moving to Longview, let's do it. That is trust. That's like you're getting to the point where you're just like, all right, that's like almost blind faith at that point, because I didn't know what he was going to do. We got to Longview, and 2 days later, I got a full-time job, and I've been there ever since. 5 years. 2 days later. I know. It's crazy. Funniest part is it's not even in Longview. It's just, I just got the job after we went there. It was like we just needed to get there, and he's like, yes, now you may have this job. As I learned to trust him and recognize his voice, I learned to obey him. I don't know how many of you guys like some people get really triggered by the word obey. Like, don't tell me what to do. But when you trust somebody, obedience doesn't feel the same way. It's not getting in line. It's not falling in line. It's just falling in love. It's falling in love with this person who just you trust. He is a person. He is the person of Christ, and I trusted him. We got so close. I learned to obey, not because I was afraid, and not because I was trying to earn anything from him, but because I just loved him. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it has actually become a really incredible life. And my faith was no longer transactional or theoretical. It was real. So I hope that encourages you guys.